Welcome to Mindfulness Manufacturing. My name is Trevor Blondeel. Spending 25 years in manufacturing, I discovered the real impact we have on turnover, communication, and the ability to manage change is how we show up. That's the essence of emotional intelligence. In each episode, we bring a guest or message to expand your skills, engage your people, and grow your organization. So let's jump in. You are most powerfully positioned to serve the person you once were. And that is how this podcast started, because there is a Trevor out there making the mistakes that I made through my career. And that's who this audience is really for, is people with good intentions. I always looked at myself as a good guy. And how I landed with people didn't always match what I intended. And other times, it comes back to I just wasn't aware. I wasn't mindful, which is why we talk about this. So today, and every episode, what is one thing that you can even think of yourself in your past self? And today is a new day. And I'm excited. I got a friend, John Raymer, on today, who spent many years in manufacturing through different roles. And after 28 years with Toyota, John now helps others discover more about themselves and their organizations through coaching and mentoring. And he's teaching at the University of Kentucky's True Lean organization in their College of Engineering. And John, where is this passion coming from on the future of manufacturing?
Well, Trevor, thank you very much for having me, and it's good to see you again. And if you were looking for a guy who's made mistakes, you found the right guy. I don't think that there has ever been a time where manufacturing leadership has been more important than it is today. We just came through COVID, in this endemic or post-pandemic world that we all find ourselves. It's got a lot of new challenges that require leaders that are not only effective, but also truly respected and even sought after by the people that work for them. And it's really critical that organizations know who you really are. And if you aren't the leader that people are drawn to, then you will most likely suffer the problems that this new post-pandemic world has, and that's severe understaffing, low training, poor morale, and everything that comes with that. You know, Trev, I think that obviously younger people have become more tech savvy. Mm-hmm. And everybody's really good with their phones and their laptops, et cetera, but fewer and fewer people are seeking out the trades. And I don't know if you've ever tried to get something done for yourself at your house. I mean, you call and call and call, nobody ever shows up. The fact of the matter is, you know, there's 10 or 12 million open jobs in this country. Other countries are suffering the same thing. And I think it's critical now that we revitalize manufacturing careers and get people involved in the trades so that we don't lose our middle class. We're really at the risk of our whole economic engine falling apart because we don't have a middle class.
And we want to keep this manufacturing in North America. Like, we've got great people, and we talked about this on a previous episode, of very good compensation. So it's not that it's an underpaid industry, yet there's not people lined up to say, hey, when I grow up, I want to work in manufacturing. Or parents, driving their kids, towards manufacturing. I think you hear more parents talking about the trades now. Well, what's the difference?
Well, I think it's key. I think one thing about COVID, many organizations have sent people to work from their homes. They've reduced their overhead. They've combined jobs. But that leaves manufacturing out in the cold because manufacturing requires people.
We can't work from home?
You can't work from home. So you have to get people into work, and you have to get people to want to work. I know a lot of manufacturing businesses right now are suffering with very poor attendance. Everybody's concerned about being ill or being exposed to someone that's being ill. And with manufacturing, if leadership is not engaging people and losing people, then obviously they can't operate at any type of true efficiency. And I think I have a lot of personal experience with companies right now. They're all looking for answers, and a lot of times the answers are right there before them. It's not necessarily the people; it's the leadership of the people and engaging the people and making them want to be there.
I always say the answers are in your four walls. We're looking outside, we're finding reasons on why people aren't coming to work or why this problem exists. And we look outside the window and kind of see where those problems are, where it's inside our house. It's right here. The people are here. The best people that you could hire are the ones that are currently working for you.
And there's no others. There's not people lined up to replace them. If you wonder why your organization is the way it is, you really should start looking very closely and honestly at yourself. The makeup of your character, what you bring to your role, it really determines everything about how your teams function. People always learn everything, both good and bad, from their leaders, whether that's a child learning from adults or a line worker, learning from their team leader, or perhaps one of your managers developing his own interpersonal skills based on the way he watches his department head. And if you want to know why someone performs well or performs poorly, look at who they learned from, and maybe that's yourself. And I know I've had that several times in my career where I had somebody really performing poorly, and the true reflection is that they learned from me. So,
John, do you know what the number one request I get from manufacturing clients is? What would you guess? What kind of support, what kind of training do you think is the number one request?
Please help me improve my staff's morale.
Very close. But in particular, which group of staff do you think they believe needs the training the most?
Oh, the people, your production worker, they need the training.
The frontline leadership. Frontline leadership is the most highly sought after training, which I do not do.
Well, I will tell you that between starting a career working online, to being a general manager running a plant, the frontline leadership position, at Toyota we call that group leader, but that was probably the most challenging position that I had. Mm-hmm. You get it from all directions in frontline leadership.
And I will correct myself, and it's not that I don't do it, I don't start there. Because it's the chocolate fountain effect, right? It comes from the top and it rolls down. And who is responsible to support those frontline leaders? You just gave the answer, and I love that. If you're going to work today and you're having a challenge with one of the leaders, are you their leader? Then you may need the mirror this morning.
I was fortunate that in addition to U.S. companies, I also spent a long time with Toyota. And it took a long time for me to understand their managerial approach. But they really do believe that if somebody is performing poorly, it's not because they're performing poorly by choice, but it's because of their leadership. And it took several years for me to understand that. And as I moved up from working on the line and got into that frontline leadership role, then I came to understand that the people that I was in charge of were only going to work as well as they saw me working. And I don't mean doing everything myself. I mean being the example, saying the words, and being the person that you should be and that you say you are. So I've made pretty much every mistake. I mentioned that before, but because I've been in a lot of different roles, I've been able to make mistakes at every role. I'd like to think that I learned from them and that I apply that learning from those mistakes. And I do like sharing. Stories about mistakes. Some of them are funny. Some of them aren't so funny.
Well, it reminds me of your saying, I've heard you say, John, which is, people see who you are, even if you don't. And when you say that to me, it just reminds me of really wanting to show up as that leader that the people that I looked up to would say, yeah, Trevor's a good leader, and we're going to maybe give him a promotion, maybe give him some more money. So I would start these behaviors of, if I go out there and I drive my team for results and I can, be a little harder, then that's going to help me progress. And those are the egg in the face moments where I look back and say, oh my goodness, I hope this former Trevor hears this. Please don't do that.
Well, if there's one thing that I could leave with people, in every role that I've ever been in, people do see who you really are. Whether that's perception or reality, they see who you really are, whether or not you see it yourself.
Mm-hmm. So what's the difference with, people say, mistakes versus lessons? And what's all the importance here? Like, what's that balance, John, of looking back versus, going through the next day and just moving on?
Well, I think there's the difference between a mistake and a lesson. A mistake is something that you do, that you let it go, and you move on. And a lesson is something that you did, it was stupid, and you learned from it, and then you applied it. I promise you, no matter what role you're in, every time you make a mistake, you're going to have the opportunity to make that mistake again. And applying learning so that you don't, and yet you avoid that pitfall, is key to being an effective leader.
And you've been working on this, John, thinking about the conversations that we've had. Like, this is a big goal of impacting manufacturing. And there's a lot of training that's out there, conflict management and communication. And I'll go back to the fact of you can't improve your frontline leadership without making a change at the top of the organization, because it does start with the leader. And many plants we go into, and I've had consulting companies on here, I've had conversations with different folks, and I've never had anyone say that, man, when I go to this plant, there's a great leadership team in place, but they just have poor team members.
Yeah.
Have you ever heard that, John?
I've heard it.
But have you ever heard anyone actually say the team members are poor, but the leadership is good?
I've had it both ways. And what's funny is, like every problem, it's never what it seems. And I will tell you that human capital, no matter how many you have, no matter where they came from, those are your best assets. They're typically the ones that are underutilized or ignored. And a lot of times problems that organizations have aren't really the problems that they think they have, and that their problems actually lie within the leadership.
Yeah, because even if you believe, and even if you have team members that aren't behaving in the character that you're looking for, most people wake up, I believe, wanting to have a good day and wanting to feel appreciated and valued. And you can take someone that maybe isn't excited to come in to work in manufacturing today, but it goes back to, it's how you show up, it's how you lead. And when people are in an environment where they feel valued and you have accountability, when leadership can provide that, your team members that maybe aren't the right fit, they're not going to be there. So you'll have performance.
Well, having been exposed to thousands and thousands and thousands of people, I have met a few that didn't want to succeed, but those are few and far between. Most people have the innate need to contribute and to feel value. If you've had a job that where you did not feel valued, you weren't happy, it didn't matter what you made, you weren't going to stay. A big reason of turnover is that people don't feel that their contributions are valued by their leadership. And I think that there are some key leadership characteristics or character traits that I find are critical. And there's many, and I'm sure that everyone listening out there has gone through training on dozens of different character traits. But I find that there's four, in my opinion, there's four that are foundational. And you can be effective and make organizational change while you work on weaknesses. But if you don't have focus on four of these foundational characteristics, it's hard for people to respond to you.
All right. What's the first one, John?
Well, the first one by far is humility. If you think that you are better than someone else, or if you are seen as thinking that you're better than someone else in any way, then you will be in every way. And by that I mean that they will perform up to the poor expectation. Humility requires you to sincerely believe that your worst employee is your best asset. If you could go out tomorrow and turn your worst employee into a performer, the rest of them come a whole lot easier.
I love running workshops, and they'll say, "Oh, you probably don't want this person in there because
That's the person you go to.
yes,
That's the person you go to.
those are the best workshops." Because man, if you can work with that person, and usually that problem employee has a lot of value, and
That problem employee also has a lot of insight into what the problems are.
yes,
And they're willing to emote it, where a lot of people aren't. A lot of people aren't willing to, a lot of people make judgments on you, and they pack them inside. Most people do. And they pack them inside, and they carry them around, and they make decisions and everything based on what they see and perceive. The people that, are maybe perceived as being lower performer, those are typically people that see what they see, and then they say what they say. And they let other people know what they see. And if you could get those people turned around and performing, the rest of them are going to see that. And I can recall one time as a junior, I was a junior leader, team leader at Toyota. And I always took a lot of pride in wanting to serve production. I was in skilled trades and wanting to serve production. I tried to take on the world. I wanted my teams to perform. I tried to do everything myself. I spent hour after exhaustive hour trying to solve problems, not necessarily using the people that had worked for me. I did everything except truly respect them. And as the experts that they were, they most likely knew the answers. They were the ones that had been in those processes, and I wasn't. The biggest mistake that a leader can make is to run over, talk over, or dismiss the opinions of the people that work for you. And once you step on that landmine, it becomes permanent. And it's very difficult, especially in skilled trades, for example. It's very difficult to overcome that. I would suggest that if you are a know-it-all, or people have told you that you're a know-it-all, or if you think that you're superhuman, if you don't think that people can do it and only you can, if you're not listening and actively engaging people that work for you, if you don't expect to respect their expertise and opinions, you have probably lost the biggest asset that you have, and that's human capital. And if you have that issue, Trevor, to me, it's important that you not only recognize that it's a total derailer for being an effective leader, but you also need to step up to it. You need to own it, and you need to let your team know that you are focused on changing it.
So what was that moment for you, John? Like you talked about being that team leader and driving for results. So did someone give you feedback, or how did, when we say people see who you are, even if you don't, what did they show you that you didn't see?
I had a person that worked for me, and he gave me some of the best feedback that I had ever heard. It was painful. He told me he was quite upset with me, and we pulled off to the side. And I've always been an open person where I'd like to be able to say what I'd like to say, and I want you to be able to say what you want to say. And he told me that he was sick and tired of hearing about how hard I worked. He was sick and tired of me telling them that they weren't doing their job. And the words he used that were so painful was, he said, "I'm tired of you wearing all of your extra hours as a badge." And to him, he was saying, "We're tired. We're tired of hearing about you. You need to come to us." Wow. And as a young leader that felt like, okay, I'm super moral and I'm super engaging and I'm really nice and I'm super skilled and all that. That's really painful to hear that I was totally ineffective as being a teammate.
And how did you respond in that moment at that age?
At it probably took a couple days for it to sink in. I did go back and follow up with the person that gave me the feedback, but also let the team know. We started having team meetings, which I found out was pretty effective. Surprise, communication is important. We started having team meetings. I did let them know that I felt like I was under a lot of pressure as a new leader, and obviously I was stepping on toes and making mistakes, and that I was committed to try to improve that, and that I really did understand that they'd been there longer than I had, and they were the experts. So I think public apology, public commitment really goes a long way.
It's funny, so many people I talk to are focused on learning from their leader, and they're getting feedback from their bosses. And this podcast is a lot less about lessons and more about stories. And when you tell the story, rarely is it, well, my leader gave me this feedback that you remember. I bet you can picture that person's face when they were talking to you.
I can.
And how many years ago?
Oh my goodness. 30,
Yeah.
34, 35 years ago.
35 years ago, and you can remember the person's expression on their face.
And I can remember how it felt.
Yeah, that's the Maya Angelou. We forget what people say. We forget what they did, but we never forget how they made us feel.
That's because people see who you really are. And if you're acting that way, if they see you that way, that's who they're going to believe you are, even if you can't see it yourself. So, if you get pulled into things and overwhelmed and under stress and blah, 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 people are going to see through that. You can't wear that. So,
well, maybe that's why the lessons we remember are from the people that saw us how we were. Because I know that I can picture those moments where a direct report or just somebody that I worked with was a truth teller. And when I heard that, it's like, oh man, like the most moment I can think of for myself is when one of my leaders said, I've never felt this poor of a leader in my career. And that person was working for me, and I was coaching them. And I just looked at him and said, well, I own that.
If you think about all the people that you've worked for, you remember the extremely good ones, and you remember the very poor ones. And the people in the middle just to kind of take up space. They're people that are doing the job, and you kind of like them getting along.
Yeah.
But you definitely remember people that you worked for that you didn't respect, and people that you would follow. I do.
It's funny you say that, because a lot of our research now, especially in leadership, we get focused on those really great leaders. I need more of this type of person. I need more, less of this type of person. But over 80% of us are okay, whatever our role is. And that's another lesson for the old Trevor, if you're listening, is pay attention to that 80%, because those are the ones that can just get 5% better by just connecting and tapping into those people. And they're the ones that are so easy to improve. Because the ones at the top are already really improving. The ones that are really struggling probably are on the wrong seat on the bus. And I'll bring this humility point back to, I believe now that when I was trying to be that powerful leader, people saw who I was, like you say, and they knew that there's a facade there. And those moments were the moments where I was doing it for me and not because I cared about the person.
It's because you were on point. You were on stage.
That's what org charts are for, right, John?
That's right.
I had the position on the org chart.
That was some other good feedback that I got once. And we'll get to that later. But anyway, getting back to humility, if you have had a supervisor or a boss or a manager or general manager, whatever, that lacked humility, think about that person. And if there are things in the way you carry yourself, if there's things in the way you manage your business that might be perceived as you lacking humility, you're making a big mistake by not addressing it. Recognize it, own it, publicly own it, and work on it. People will respect you when you say, hey, I suck at this and I'm trying to get better.
That is the secret. And it seems like, oh, well, that's a weakness. And as Brene Brown, as we talk about in this podcast, it's the vulnerability is a power, and you can't have courage without vulnerability. And that is really what I'm trusting that listeners are getting out of this. Heck, I'm going to learn something from you today and something that I need to do different tomorrow. So what's number 2?
The next single most important leadership character trait that I think a person has to have, no matter what your role, you have to have integrity. And what people perceive of your personal integrity is vital to being a sought-out leader. And you remember, being truly effective requires that people are constantly seeking you out and that they respect your insights. And if people aren't doing that, you're probably not as effective as you thought.
Tune in to the next episode to hear John unpack integrity and the other 2 key characteristics of leadership in manufacturing.
Hey folks, appreciate you taking the time to join us today. If you enjoyed this episode, share it with someone. Haven't subscribed yet? Do it now. Remember, if you want results, the key is increasing your awareness of how you show up.